Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Ben. Now, I recently watched a great video by Star Wars Theory about how Episode 9 would play out if he wrote it. So I decided to create my own version. So this is what would happen if I wrote Star Wars Episode 9. So first of all, we are going to accept the events of The Last Jedi. I know some of it sucks, Snoke, but we are just going to accept it. We're going to bring back some classic characters, and also since Carrie Fisher is sadly no longer with us, we're going to have to explain why she isn't in the movie, and I think this should be done from the start to get it out of the way so we can go on with the main part of the film without having questions about where Leia is in our minds. So also I'm going to ditch some of the characters that just weren't interesting or were cringe-worthy. In this version, I'm also going to include some plot points that, according to one Reddit user who has a reliable track record of leaking Star Wars info, will be in Episode 9. I won't include any major spoilers though. So here's how it would go. The opening crawl will explain that 3 years after the events of The Last Jedi, Kylo Ren is ruling over most of the galaxy, and most people don't have a problem with him. His regime isn't as cruel as they expected. General Leia Organa's health deteriorated after her near-death experience getting blown out of the bridge of that ship, and she finally passed away, leaving Poe as her successor. But the Resistance is struggling for members because most people are having quite a good time. The First Order has brought a surprising amount of wealth to the galaxy, and not much suffering. At least that's what people think. We start with Leia's funeral. Poe, Rey, and Finn are all together there. It's a kind of similar ceremony to Padme's funeral, only with less guests. Leia is laying there and people are mourning. There are speeches. Rey and Poe and Finn talk amongst themselves, saying that a lot of friends of Leia didn't come because they now support the First Order. You see a hologram of a man in a cape making a speech from the back. Rey asks Poe who he is. He says that he was a good friend of Han and Leia back when they were first together. Rey and Finn look interested, but you never see this man's face. We then wipe to the scene of a female pilot. Let's say she's played by Chloe Bennett from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. You know, Logan Paul's girlfriend. Anyway, she's frantically fighting with the controls of a small starship, leaving storm clouds of an atmosphere of a planet. As she leaves the atmosphere, a Resurgence-class Star Destroyer leaves orbit and pursues her. Her droid calculates a hyperspace route and she jumps. Now we cut to the bridge of the Star Destroyer. Hux appears on a hologram instructing the captain to pursue. The Star Destroyer jumps also. Now we cut back to on board one of the Resistance ships. Rey is in her quarters. She has her lightsaber that was broken in half in Episode 8. She's been reading Jedi books and has prepared all the necessary components. She goes into meditation using the Force to construct a new lightsaber. Then she suddenly has a vision of Kylo. He looks at her, saying, "Come with me, Rey. Join me. I'm going to Force impregnate you." No, that's just a joke. Anyway, without thinking, she says okay. Her kyber crystal suddenly starts emitting a red glow. She screws up her face to resist, and then she hears the sound of Luke saying, "Resist, Rey. Follow the light." She concentrates even harder. A tear runs down her cheek. She says, "I know you're an illusion," and Kylo disappears. The kyber crystal glows blue again and the lightsaber closes around it, dropping onto the table. Rey comes out of meditation breathing heavily, in shock. I think it would be cool to see the act of making a lightsaber. We've never seen this before in a live-action Star Wars movie, and the fact that Rey is being tempted by Kylo is also setting up something for later on in the movie. Suddenly red lights flash. It's red alert. No, this isn't Star Trek. Anyway, Rey looks up and we cut to the bridge of the ship where Finn and Poe are. Someone says, "We're receiving a transmission." The woman from the ship escaping that planet appears on a holo saying, "I have the intelligence and I'm at the rendezvous coordinates, but I was followed. They'll be here any second." Poe orders a jump to light speed and they arrive to find a small ship under attack from a Resurgence-class Star Destroyer. Several Resistance ships arrive and they fight a battle. Poe looks anxious to get out in an X-Wing, but he is stuck on the bridge as commander. Finn knows the ship's weaknesses since he was in the First Order, and he helps direct the mission, and the Resistance manage to disable the ship. Then there is a meeting scene with the female pilot who is revealed to have been a Resistance spy. She discloses her intel. The reason the First Order is so prosperous and have brought so much wealth to the known galaxy is because they are enslaving entire species out in the unknown regions to build ships and weapons, etc. There is a planet where their main production facility is located and it employs billions of slaves. This idea was actually taken from a supposed leak, so maybe we will see something like this in the movie. Finn asks Poe if they can mount an attack, but Poe tells him their reinforcements still haven't agreed to come. Finn persuades Poe to allow a covert mission, so Finn goes back with the team of commandos, including the female spy, to look for weaknesses in the base. Meanwhile, Rey takes the Falcon back to Ahch-To with Chewie on a journey of discovery. She goes to the cave that has dark side energy. Kylo appears, telling her to join him again. Since they are equals in the Force, no one else can understand them. She hears a whisper, "Your parents were nobodies." And he ends up by saying, "I am all you have," manipulating Rey. They kiss, Rey reluctantly. Cut back now to the planet in the unknown regions where Finn and co have infiltrated dressed as stormtroopers. They see slaves being processed. One male of a blue-skinned species is turned away by an officer saying to a stormtrooper, "We don't take their kind. Send him back to his home planet." They think nothing of it, but it's significant for something later on in the movie. Finn and the team collect the info they need and end up in a hangar. They see that it's actually Boba Fett who is running the operation. Yep, he did escape from the Sarlacc pit. And this is the first of a couple of big reveals. Now we cut back to Ahch-To. In a hut, Luke appears as a Force ghost and talks to Rey. "You still don't believe he can't be saved," Luke says, talking about Kylo Ren. Rey then says, "I don't know." Luke goes on, "I kept a few things from you, but now I'm going to tell you everything." Luke explains how it was after he fell in love with Mara Jade and got married they settled down and ran the Jedi School. After confronting Kylo Ren, like you see in The Last Jedi, Kylo vowed to kill everyone and stormed off. His students with kids sent them away to obscure planets for safety, and Kylo did come back, taking the school by surprise. Mara Jade fought him while Luke tried to rescue his students from the Knights of Ren. He wounds Mara, and two of Luke's students, a male and a female, try to protect Mara, but they get killed by Kylo, who then kills Luke's wife. Kylo then leaves before Luke can rush over to him, setting off an explosion that buries Luke in the rubble, which directly then links to this scene. Luke then says, "Your parents tried to save my wife, but Kylo had too much hate. They couldn't stand up to it. It takes a certain oneness with the Force. It takes giving up anger and hate to let the Force flow through you and determine your destiny to balance out the dark." Rey says, "My parents were your students?" Luke then says, "Yes, and two of my very best students at that. They were killed by Kylo in cold blood. That is when I knew there was no turning back for him." Rey then jumps up and runs down to the evil cave. Kylo appears, saying, "You are weak." She slashes at him with a lightsaber, but he just laughs. She's too worked up. She remembers Luke's words about letting go and giving up anger and hate. She becomes very calm and says what Kylo has done is wrong and the Force will restore balance. She then has a moment of enlightenment and says to herself, "That is why I'm here. That's my place in all of this, to restore the balance." She hears Luke say, "Let the Force flow through you and determine your destiny to balance out the dark." She's very concentrated and does one slash with the lightsaber and Kylo disappears. We now cut to Kylo on his ship. He suddenly opens his eyes. Hux walks in and starts shouting at him, saying he has let his emotions for the girl cloud his judgment. Now is the perfect time to attack. To Hux's surprise, Kylo says okay, you may take a fleet of 7 ships to attack the Resistance. We now cut back to Finn and the female spy arriving back at the Resistance ship with the intelligence. An officer tells them that the Outer Rim allies have reached an agreement to support the Resistance and come. Ships drop out of hyperspace and you see a man in a cape from the back walking onto the Resistance ship. It's the same guy from Leia's funeral. It's Lando. He explains to Finn and Poe how he had to convince the Hutts and the Twi'leks, etc. to join. Poe says, no time like the present. They have the intel they need and they can free the planet from the First Order. Suddenly the Falcon jumps out of hyperspace and Rey and Chewie ask for permission to join the attack. All the ships jump to the unknown region. The fleet hides behind a planet, undetected. They have a meeting like the one in Return of the Jedi where they explain that the first wave is a covert ground attack working from Finn and the female spy's intel. The next phase is using the prisoners to help steal a load of ships, and then the Resistance /Hutt /Twi'lek fleet will come out and they'll have a massive showdown with the First Order. Rey does her own thing and goes after Kylo. She finds Kylo just as he is on the phone with Hux, telling him to get back here immediately. She says, "You lied to me. You killed my parents. They weren't nobody. They were Master Skywalker students." Kylo coldly says, "They were nobody to me." Rey goes crazy, slashing at him with a lightsaber. Meanwhile, Finn has broken out a load of prisoners. They start to steal the First Order ships and attack the Star Destroyers in orbit. Finn encounters Boba Fett and has a showdown with him and wins. He then tries to make an escape as planned. Back on board the Resistance ship, Lando says to Poe, "I can see you're itching to get out there, boy." Poe says, "Yeah, but how can I coordinate an attack from the air?" Lando says, "I did just that when I was your age," obviously talking about how Lando piloted the Falcon and led the attack on the Death Star 2 at the Battle of Endor. "Let an old man take care of things here," he says. Poe says thanks and gets in an X-Wing and joins the attack. Other X-Wings follow him in formation. Now back to Finn escaping from the slave planet. He exits the building and bumps into Rey, who is about to win the battle with Kylo. Kylo has lost his lightsaber and Rey is holding a lightsaber at Kylo's neck. Kylo uses the Force to pick up a huge crate and suspend it above Finn's head and says, "If I die, so does he." Rey hesitates. Then suddenly Poe does a Fast and Furious style drift move with his X-Wing and knocks the crate away from Finn's head. Finn says, "Now!" and Rey finishes Kylo. In orbit, Hux's fleet now arrives to find that they are already overpowered. Hux's officers tell him there is no way they can win. Hux leaves the bridge. He turns on a holo and you don't see who he's talking to at first. You hear him say, "We are losing." And you hear the other person say, "I only agreed to help you in exchange for freedom for my people, like I did with the Empire before you. You can take my advice or leave it." And you chose to leave it. The camera pans around and you see him talking to none other but Thrawn. Thrawn says, "If you want to preserve what is left, I suggest you get out of there now." Back to the Resistance ship bridge. An officer tells Lando, "Sir, several First Order ships are preparing to jump to hyperspace." They jump, and Lando asks, "How many?" The officer says, 7 ships made it, sir. The other 45 are either destroyed or adrift." Lando says, "I can live with that." Rey and Chewie bring Finn and the female spy /commando back in the Falcon. Finn and the female spy share a moment and hold hands on the couch. Finn finally gets a girlfriend. After this, they all meet up in the hangar on the Rebel ship, hug and celebrate. Lando says that he's going back to the Outer Rim and he hands command back to Poe. Now, this is just so that Billy Dee Williams isn't obliged to be in later movies. It can be a one-off appearance because, you know, he's already in his 80s, so you never know, he might not be acting for that much longer, just being realistic here. Now, after this celebration, the camera then pans back out into space and the final credits roll. Okay guys, so there's my version. We get to see some classic characters. We see Luke, we see Lando again, we get Thrawn thrown in there from Rebels, which, you know, it's right at the end, so it kind of hints at what might be to come in the following movies, kind of like what Marvel does in their movies, giving you a little Easter egg at the end, whatever. And Finn also finally gets a love interest, a more realistic one than the kind of cringe fest of awkwardness that we were treated to in the previous movie. So please leave your comments below about what you think should happen. Subscribe if you're new, and if you made it all the way through this, you certainly are Generation Tech.